Kick off.
Good to go.
Great. See, we got something to chat here before we kick off. All right. So first, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm really excited to bring this webinar to everybody and focus on how independent agencies could drive success leveraging AI. I'm Jay Weintraub, Managing Director of our agency business at Resonate. I've been with Resonate for about a decade. Really excited to be joined by Mike Valetti, Strategy Director at fiveeighty, and Tommy Shaw, Executive Director of Media at fiveeighty. Tommy, Mike, if you guys could just give a brief intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Pleasure to meet everybody. Happy to be here. My name's Mike Violette. I'm the Executive Strategy Director at Agency fiveeighty. We are an independent commerce shop, so we focus on mid to lower funnel conversion, kind of driving activity for our clients. I'm also recently a converted client service director, so I think I bring unique perspective in seeing it from both the business side and the travel side. And here with me is my partner in crime, Tommy Shaw.
Yeah, hey everybody. I am Tommy Shaw. I am a longtime Resonate partner, I would say. I've bounced across different agencies and partnered with these guys in a number of different ways, but I hit up everything from a media and activation standpoint at fiveeighty. As Mike said, a lot of what we're doing is heavily focused kind of in that CPG, beverage alcohol kind of commerce space, and driving more units and depletions and everything else that kind of comes along with that for our clients. But excited to kick things off and speak to AI and how we're using it at fiveeighty.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Tommy. Mike, sorry for butchering your last name there.
It's all good. Takes different forms depending on who we're speaking to.
Right. So for everybody on the line today, I'm going to start just by kind of setting the stage on the challenges we see in the agency space and kind of what we're all facing. Please feel free to drop comments, questions. We'd love to know if you guys are aligned or if there's anything that you think we're missing. Then want to talk about how Resonate's really helping to evolve the agency and really help kind of move things forward, especially as the world continues to change. And I'll have some practical examples to walk through. And then for the real fun part, we're going to have a conversation with Mike and Tommy around how they're leveraging AI, the solutions they built, and how they're driving and using Resonate to drive success. So we'll jump right in. I think this is probably there we go. Probably similar and very familiar to everybody on the line. The traditional agency model is being pressured from a lot of different angles. It's not just one place. It's coming from kind of all angles. I think starting with clients in-housing, consultancies popping up, and also just the holding groups over the last 12 to 18 months really making their bet on data, AI, and technology, acquiring data companies. And we're seeing them show up in more pitches downstream, right? Pitches that they would never show up in now. We don't think it's long before they're going to start showing up in pitches that are $8 to $10 million in media, right? So how do we help you level up and go compete as an independent agency? Then we add in the dynamic of AI, obviously, where it's really helped drive efficiencies and workflows and help with pitches and driving more value for clients. But it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because that's also putting a little bit more of a strain on margins and clients wanting you to do more with less and understanding, hey, you could drive more efficiency. You could deliver that value a lot quicker with less bodies. So that pricing model needs to change. And that's where we want to start to shift the conversation to more value-driven solutions, not so much of the old model. And then, this year, obviously, a lot of challenges with macroeconomic trends. And what we want to focus on is how, as an agency, could you advise your clients to help them navigate as things like tariffs, immigration, inflation start to really take effect in their everyday lives? So what we see as kind of the agency 2.0 or 3.0 is first, clients aren't waiting, right? They're putting their business up. They want results and they want them faster. So we want to help you think strategically. And what we mean by that is being able to leverage up-to-date insights, being able to give your teams more time to let their talent shine. And not just by providing insights and, quick bites of information or even reports, because we truly believe like insights in a vacuum, not super valuable. We really believe being able to take action on the insights is where that magic happens. That's where that performance happens, where you drive better business outcomes. And we really are focused on helping our agency partners deliver on the promise they make in those pitches, right? And be able to continuously drive value. And that last part is super important. right? We want to help you be a proactive partner to your clients and bring new ideas and bring new solutions that is really going to help them make an impact and really help them advise and stay ahead of whatever's going on. So think about Resonate as your ways for growth, right? We're going to provide you with really deep insights, 15,000 insights and over 250 million people. And we go really deep outside of demographics and behaviors, but we want to help you understand the why. What motivates people? What drives people to purchase? What drives people to take action? And we know that that's really different by vertical, by specific industry. So we'll help understand nuances in why do people make healthcare decisions? Because we know that's much different than when they're making a travel decision or a decision for their family or a decision, to travel on business versus pleasure, right? How do we help you understand those nuances? Now you throw the wrench in of all the change that's happening, and we want to help you stay ahead of that and really help you predict what's going to happen so you could help advise your clients instead of fearing it, really thrive through it. And to that point, everybody's seen the headlines, right? We had major tariffs put in place. Inflation's been around, immigration changes, and what this is causing is a lot of anxiety on a consumer, right? And this is leading to a big change in how people perceive or people buy and their behaviors. And you need to understand that audience shift as you go and plan and buy media. So what we think about and what we see is consumers over the last 6 months have increased their concern about the economy by over 22%. That's a huge number, right? And what are they concerned about? Well, our AI, our technology is keeping up to pace and saying, hey, it's things like taxes increasing, it's US economic slowdown, it's people worried about losing their job, worried about a stock market crash. These are really big issues that are weighing on people. And in our industry, it's very consistent with the message, right? Where the IAB released a report and said, hey, 41% of advertisers plan to cut social spend due to tariffs. Now, you don't want to just start cutting spend or test and learn at this point, right? You got to make your dollars work smarter. You got to have insights and data that's telling you where to optimize, where you should be spending money, and where you should be suppressing. And that's why I want to kind of finish off here with an example of how this looks in the real world. So we actually took a look at a luxury affluent shopper audience. And you can see a really healthy audience, 17.3 million people, 25.8 million IDs to directly go and target. But now what happens when you think about how their life has changed, how their current financial situation has changed, how their personal financial situation has changed? What are their concerns over the next 6 months? Well, now this audience looks a lot different, right? So when you actually put those factors into that audience, there's 7.7 million fewer people that say they're concerned about economic risk, which means they're not purchasing as much. They're not actually in market anymore. So if you're targeting that initial audience, it's way too broad. You're wasting a lot of media spend. And this is where we could really help show you that nuance, show you how those audiences are changing so you could reach the right people and also hit the other audiences with different messaging based on what they're concerned about. Now, we don't just leave you there, right? Something that Tommy will definitely touch on is the ability to directly activate these audiences. So one nice thing is with the click of a button, you could literally take any audience built and push this to any endpoint. So you're seeing a few of the common players here from a DSP perspective, but over 300 DSP connections, social really can push to anywhere, direct connections with Meta and TikTok, audio, CTV. And this is eliminating the risk of human error. You don't have to go and replicate the audience or work with another partner to get to this persona. You're able to take exactly what the strategy and planning teams validated, modified, or optimized, and push that directly to create speed to insights for your clients. And just some of the results we see in using our data. Now, does our data perform in every campaign? Obviously not. But it's performed better in market than it ever has. I won't go through each of these metrics. I think a couple that stand out would be the 82% lift in responsiveness using our lookalike models over LiveRamp, just in the nature and how we do that. And I think the big surprise for us in the last 12 months has been outperforming Meta's audiences, even if they're AI optimized. We've consistently seen that across different verticals and examples and use cases. So with that, I'm going to transition, loop Mike and Tommy back in here. And Mike, Tommy, I think we'll start a little broad. And if you guys want to dive in on your perspective on how AI has evolved and how you're using it today most effectively.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of get us started, Tommy and I were talking about this morning, and I think when we think about AI, we really see it as a set of tools in a toolbox, a set of items to be kind of reached and grabbed at the right moment in the right place. So it definitely doesn't offer the first or the final answer or the output. And Jay, to kind of go back to your first point around why Resonate, the reason that we enjoy working with Resonate is there's a difference between what I think and what I say, and then ultimately what I do when no one's watching, right? So as we think about the players in the space and choosing the right tools, the reason that we selected Resonate is because of how you guys survey and how you also require kind of the digital footprint and the digital tracking, right? So there's an observed difference between how I present myself and how I show up and behave digitally. So we really start with Resonate because of that kind of differentiator. And as we go further down, kind of like developing campaigns, and as we get further away from source data, that delta kind of compounds as we get further into campaign development. So as we think about it, it's very much a tool in a toolbox to be reached for at specific times during a campaign journey.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say quickly on my end from a media standpoint is I think the big thing on the AI side, and we'll touch on it a little bit later as well, is the ability to verify the results and outputs from the tool. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can get to answers much quicker than we used to. I think how we act on that though still needs to be human based. Like there's a lot of things that we can get the answers to, but then it's taking those answers and knowing based on the actual goals of the campaign or based on the different creative variations we have in market or based on the different audiences that we're targeting. It's really leveraging AI to get us to the point where we can then make the decisions in a quicker environment.
Yeah, that's totally aligned there. And kind of following up on that point, it might be more for Mike or Tom here. What are the best practices you think for applying AI throughout a project?
Yeah, so I think Tommy and I each kind of have our different pieces here. So as we think about it, and as you kind of opened, right, we see it as a speed accelerant. We also see it as enhancing the quality of our output. And then also it provides cost savings and efficiencies to our clients. But what we really want to kind of share with this audience is that human element, that critical thinking is still very much required in the process, at least as these tools kind of stand today. We were in a pitch last week, and one of the conversations with our clients is that, these tools are very much commoditizing the first 80% of projects, right? Every agency, every partner, every competitor is really able to get to comparable answers using comparable tools in a comparable amount of time. It's really about what do you do with that information once you've kind of set that foundation. And then as Tommy mentioned, that puts more time, more emphasis, more, it requires validation, it requires verification to ensure that the conclusions that you arrived at are sound and presentable and are going to be effective for our clients. So to your point about, best practices for applying it throughout the project, it's really about reaching for the right tool at the right moment and using it appropriately. So, if we think about the strategic practice, AI models, AI tools, including our own, is really good for research. It's really good for data analysis. It's really good for consolidation. It's really great for narrative development. It's really strong in cross-referencing multiple data sets, looking at different components like category, like audience, like brand. But if you think about the kind of innate structure and how some of these LLMs have been based, they're really around predicting the next right word and the next right
Right.
sequence of events. So when it comes to insight development and identification, right, they're supposed to be revelatory. They're supposed to feel fresh. They're supposed to feel new. We don't count on LLMs or AI to give us those insights, right? It still requires that human intervention and that human observation of putting those pieces together and finding something tangible and executable for our team. Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about media, and we can come back to creative?
Yeah, I would say on the media side, the two key places we probably leverage this the most is really on the audience development and channel research side of stuff. From a channel research standpoint, it could be using something like Resonate to even go in and see where our audiences are most engaged, as well as developing what those audiences can be and should be. I think similar to Mike though is like it gets us to that point where then the decision making does then go back to the human. Like, so the final media plan development isn't all being done by AI, but what it can help us do is evaluate who potential partners could be. It could evaluate potential channels that were not originally thought of, but are a big opportunity and maybe a white space the competitors are not playing in. Things of that nature. And then same thing on the optimization side. Like I mentioned earlier, we're using it a lot, whether it's audience optimization or whether it's us exporting large sets of data into here and getting insights onto, how things are performing and what are insights that we can bring to a client. So it's very good at that in-flight analytics portion and optimization. But similar to, we're not developing a final media plan, we're also not developing a final wrap report in AI. And a lot of that again goes back to the fact that there's a number of macro strategies and creative development and different audiences and things of that nature, where if we have AI look at that more holistically, it transparently just doesn't get us exactly what we need. I think it would be very obvious that what we are presenting is not what we set out to at the beginning of the campaign. But again, I think there's a number of things where between that beginning stage and final stage where it can lend a big hand in helping better performance, but also helping target the right audiences and find that white space for clients.
Yeah, I appreciate that and totally aligned there. I think, I was speaking with you guys earlier about this, but being at a conference doing a workshop, and it essentially takes the mundane work out, right? It allows your talent to shine more, allows you to actually use your skills to put, from a strategy lens or a media lens into more work versus, the data collection. So totally aligned there. Would love for you guys to tell us a little bit about, your internal AI tool, Maven, that you guys have developed.
Yeah, of course. So Maven is our internal dashboard and it's our central brain. There's a number of functions that we use, but ultimately it really helps us consolidate and synthesize client level data. So this isn't overarching, sweeping broad strokes. What it is it's client specific sandboxes where we will consolidate category data, audience data, brand data, cultural inputs, performance and media. And it kind of democratizes key information across our teams. It makes everybody at 580, everybody working on those client teams, that much more dangerous. And the other thing that's unique about it is we use it throughout our process, but what it allows us to do is that it allows us to take broad swaths of information and then make it conversational. Right. So rather than reading or absorbing yourself in 100 pages worth of content, we are using Maven to turn that into Q&A for discovery. Right. If I'm interested in a certain path or if I'm ideating against a specific brief, it takes that corpus of information and then it turns it into a conversational model for our team. So we use it very much at the upfront. But we also use it as an accelerant, and there's different tools that have been built into it. To Tommy's point around media performance and optimization, but also creativity. We have a versioning tool in here. Jay, going back to your point about taking out the mundane workload, right? We're not going to rely on AI systems to develop original artwork in its final form, right?
Right.
But we're going to use this tool to version out 5 to 10 standard IAB banner sizes, which allows us to A, B, C, D, E, F, G test messaging, and it allows Tommy to go into market with 6 suites of creative, 6 different hypotheses that we will then kind of test, trial, and scale for different clients.
Yeah, that's great. And how does Resonate help power this?
Yeah, of course. Going back to kind of our opener, Resonate very much powers the audience portion of this tool. And that's very much our starting point. So as I mentioned, we're a commerce agency. There's a lot of gatekeepers that it takes to get to before we get to the consumer. But at the end of the day, if that relevancy and that consumer pull through isn't there, it all falls down. So Resonate helps us really identify the audiences that we want to speak to. But then also that export those 5, 10, 15,000 data points that we find relevant, help support kind of the audience function of our tool and keep us closer to consumer.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. And especially for independent agencies, how does, our AI help drive strategy and better business outcomes for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here. I would say from the front end, and I spoke a little bit about this even on the media side, but from the front end, I think it supports in helping build a stronger foundation when we enter the market. So when we first launch a campaign, I would like to think that we are maybe ahead of where we were prior to leveraging the platform, just due to the fact that we have a more potentially strategic approach as well as more targeted audiences and audience development that we're able to leverage. And then I think as it continues to play and with the those outcomes, we also look at things on the back end as well from a reporting standpoint. I know one of the great things about the tool, and it's probably something that I've mentioned previously on other panels, is getting the insights on the engaged audiences is also a big piece of what we look into. So being able to not only build out these audiences and activate them, but then actually get insights on of those audiences, who is engaged most, and then amplifying against that is definitely key, I would say, to driving those better outcomes for a lot of our different clients.
Yeah, totally. And Tommy, to that point, maybe you could share a moment where the data surprised you. Maybe it's an audience you hadn't considered or an insight that changed course of a campaign.
Yeah, I definitely have a couple. I would say one of them is we work with a women's supplement brand, and transparently, they are more targeted to an older demographic and women going through menopause, I would say. One of the unique things that we've found in kind of leveraging research and leveraging some of the different things in Resonate is we've found some channels that transparently we probably wouldn't have originally thought of, kind of as a major activation point. And then with that, we've taken that and dove in deeper and have found some really unique opportunities. So like something like this, maybe podcasts, where if you were to ask me 8 months ago if I thought podcasts were a good way to reach women, 45 plus, I probably would have told you no. But then based on some of the research, we reached out to the likes of iHeart and Wondery and other people in the space, and we found a bunch of different ways where we could get into the space and reach those audiences more directly, that transparently we probably wouldn't have even dove into if we had it. Another recent example that we had, and again, this dives really more into the, I would say, media and activation side, but we have an out bev brand where we were really looking into media formats that consumers are most likely to engage with and like where they're most likely to engage. And as everybody who has worked in the alcohol bev space, everybody knows that in-store is usually the key component. You want to have the biggest floor space. You want to have as much POS in store as you possibly can. And with that, we actually found some insights that this audience that we were going after under indexed quite a bit for POS and more of those in-store placements, and actually had an opportunity to really make the focus more pre-store. So with that, we kind of shifted some of our recommendations to be more focused around how do we get this shopper in the mindset prior to even entering the store, because they aren't really paying attention to anything once they've entered. They kind of have a shopping list and they're just getting what is on that list. So it's definitely unique. I would say every campaign probably has an insight that we've pulled, but those are two unique examples that come to mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're a little, I'd say from a full service perspective, you guys are a little unique from the retail shopper side. So we'd love to know how you guys manage multi-channel campaigns across retail shopper and brand media, and how are you using those real-time insights? You talked a little bit about that, but to plan and pivot more effectively across those channels.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the key thing for us is really leveraging it on the front end to build out different segmentation to, I would say, gain learnings, but also target more strategically. So where we have an opportunity to target category buyers, target adjacent category buyers, target people down to specific brand levels, et cetera. There's a number of different opportunities there that we can segment that data. One of the bullets on this slide that I think is key is making it addressable. In the fact that a lot of these platforms are programmatic, we can get some of this data from a cookie based or from something, older that has been around. But on the social side, we use this data almost across all of our campaigns, just due to the fact that over time, the data that's available in the social platforms, especially Meta, has not been as strong as it was 5 years ago due to different regulations and different things kind of in these different platforms. Targeting somebody based off of just an interest that they may have liked a brand 5 years ago versus actually knowing that they bought that brand within the last 3 months, and we can now target them much more directly and eliminate a lot of that waste has been key for us, I would say, in terms of how we activate and how we ensure that we're reaching the right audiences.
No, I appreciate that. And guys, as we wrap up, I think, not specific to Resonate anyway, I would love to know from an independent agency perspective, and for the people on the line, not every independent agency obviously has a tech stack or analytics team or massive, data stack that maybe a holding group has. So for someone to modernize their approach, where would you suggest or recommend they start?
Sure. So I think our first recommendation would be start with a problem that you're trying to solve. Start specific, try to alleviate a pain point or to overcome a challenge. Is certainly the first point. I think the second point is, as you're getting started, stick to off the shelf as possible, right? There's some great products from Anthropic and ChatGPT, and Google's tech stack and AI stack is quite sophisticated. So don't feel like the first move should be to go out and build something that new or something proprietary, or to throw AI at a broad swath of problems. It really starts with trying to address a very specific problem, alleviate a very specific pain point, identify a practice within your organization that, if multiplied exponentially, is going to drive incremental value for you or for your business. And I think it really boils down to kind of starting small until you gain some momentum, understand the tools, and then accelerate and pour gas on it.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Mike. Tom, anything to add on that?
No, I would agree with everything there. I mean, I think the key is understanding at first. So I think that's why we always recommend to start small, especially in this area. If you're an agency who hasn't done anything, I know we had a ton of learnings in the first 6-12 months that we started really leveraging a lot of these different tools, where I think as you grow and as you learn and how and when to use different solutions, the rest of it kind of comes into place a lot quicker, whether it's partnering with Resonate, whether it's partnering with different tools that are industry specific that you can pull into a more AI. There's a lot of things that will come as you build, but you almost have to learn that you need that in a way to then get to solving those problems. So agree with Mike, and would double down on a lot of what he said.
Yeah, I actually love what you guys are talking about around like, hey, finding that problem you want to solve. All right, like
Yeah.
that's where we always talk about like, hey, that's really where you should focus and keeping it, small and scaling. So I appreciate that. So guys, as we wrap up, I'll open it up for questions. It looks like we have one in the chat. Let me see here. So from Jenna, curious if any clients have been reluctant, skeptical to incorporate AI into their strategy, whether it be media, creative, or otherwise. If so, how do you find is best way to alleviate their concerns? So I will say this has come up with some of our clients, but Mike, Tommy, would love to throw it to you because I'm sure you're more on the front lines of this.
Of course. The short answer is transparency, and I'll give you the long answer as well. We definitely see this bubble up. We've seen it take a couple of forms. The first is clients not wanting their data to be included in training data or as part of any models, which is entirely fair, right? And when that client request comes through, we as an agency partner are invested in their growth and their success. And when it's requested that we don't, right? Because that's what a good partner would do. The second thing on that end is ensuring that our subscriptions and our data subscriptions and our models, right, are not open to the web, right? So any of the AI tools that we're using are not training broader or more macro LLMs off of this information. It stays contained within a sandbox. And then, Jenna, to your question, we're actually seeing this show up in MSAs. So that if we are going to be using specific tools, they need to be disclosed and they need to be pre-approved before we can use any of this. So on the strategy side, from an overcome standpoint, right? If we can cross some of the hurdles and kind of just be transparent in how it's used, I think the selling point is really we're likely going to get to the same endpoint. We're likely still going to make the recommendations based off of some of the things that we spoke about in the upfront. It's just going to happen a lot faster and it's going to happen a lot cheaper, right? Because we're automating some of that think work. I think the same thing applies to creative output and creative efficacy, right? We can develop source and starter creative assets for much cheaper pennies on the dollar, or we can go to an exotic location and shoot the same thing for, you know, a couple $100,000, if not a seven-figure sum. And then Tommy, I'll let you speak to kind of the media component, but I think overall people are becoming more comfortable with the use cases and the outputs. And as that kind of continues, people are starting to see, clients are starting to see the benefits from a cost, from a speed, from a quality standpoint, that it's hard to ignore.
Gotcha.
Definitely.
Tom, any build on?
Yeah, the only thing I would say from a media perspective is I think it's client to client what their expectations are. I think a lot of them also align to the brand guidelines that they've built and set out. And I would say a lot of that probably comes into some of the key platforms. So a lot of these platforms now have AI built in as well, where we have some clients who want to take advantage of every single solution that these partners are putting out there, as long as it helps performance. We have others where, from a brand guideline perspective, they restrict any of the AI tools that these partners are leveraging because they want to make sure that their creative is exactly what was approved, the text was exactly how they wanted it presented, et cetera. So there's always going to be some, I would say, uphill battles with some of these different things. I think the opportunity is to show clients how, on the media side, leveraging AI has bettered campaigns. So if you can get one or two clients who are okay with these strategies, are okay with testing the waters, seeing how things perform, you can then build use cases around that in speaking to your other clients. Because I promise you, if you go to a client, you say, hey, we did this for X brand and it drove a 30% lift, they're going to hear the 30% lift more than they're going to hear anything else. So I think having those use cases and some of the back end done is definitely helpful. But transparently, you definitely have to have clients who are on board to test and learn and grow with you, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said here. I think what Mike said initially is something that has come up with our clients. I think there's an educational gap, right? It's like, hey, like we get the question like, oh, well, we don't want our data to be used in your models, and they aren't, right? We don't use any client data as part of our AI. I think it's that understanding, right? We have an agency up in Boston we work with, and this came up a lot where they have some clients that are like, we don't want any use of AI, and we help them dig in a little bit and understand like what was the hesitation. And to Mike's point, it was like worried about our data being used in models. We're worried about something being replicated, right? We're worried about it not being accurate. And they were able to help with our help, but with other tools and other kind of educational materials, help them get the client more comfortable, right? And overall, just being able to say like, hey, it matters what data is also fueling the AI. So that's one of the challenges I always say to like new AI tools, right? Is to ask like, what is the data that's powering that model? Because I think some of the fear in the space right now is like there's AI models being built off of AI models, which gets further and further away from that ground truth. So that's what I always think about, right? Like always ask like, what is the data? What is that ground truth that's actually fueling your model? And make sure you're comfortable with that. And I think you'll be in a good place. But I think it just comes from a place of education and getting comfortable and testing and learning. Any other questions? Kayla, I don't see any others. Not sure if there's others from the group. Awesome. Well, Mike, Tommy, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your guys' time and insights today. Thanks everybody for joining. This webinar will be on demand and I will be able to share the link. So hope everybody enjoys the rest of your day and thanks again for the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.